Hi, fifth grade. I'm ready to read another chapter of our book, These Are My People, written by Mildred T. Howard about Gladys Aylward. And the title of this chapter is Across the Mountains. All right, here we go. Gladys lay still for a moment. Then she moved carefully. A sharp burning pain shot across her shoulder blades. I remember last time, right before we left off, she was hit by a bullet. The bullet went right across my shoulder, she thought. I'm not dying. I'm hardly hit. Then, seeing the puffs of dust that the bullets made as they hit the ground around her, she realized that she wasn't safe yet. The soldiers were using her fallen body as a target practice. Gladys tore open the fastenings of her padded coat and wriggled out of it. Her Bible had fallen under her stomach. Using it as a sled, she edged forward. She pushed with her toes, pulled with her hands inch by inch. Then quickly she tumbled over into the ditch. Above her head she could hear bullets spattering into the discarded coat. Gladys bent over and ran. When she came to a spot where wheat grew above the ditch, she climbed out. Parting the wheat with her hands, she squirmed into the center of the field. Gladys stayed where she was, knowing that the Japanese would lock themselves in the city at dark. Curling up into a ball, she slept, and when Gladys awoke, the sun was high in the sky. She tunneled through the wheat to the edge of the field and lay still, waiting. As soon as the shadows darkened the valley, she slipped out of her hiding place and hurried across the rolling hills to the mountains. 2 days later, she arrived at the Inn of the Eight Happinesses. Tired and aching, she stumbled into the courtyard. "Awade!" The shouts of the children brought Ninepence running. "Mother," she cried, "what's wrong?" "We must leave here, Ninepence." Gladys looked around at the children close to her. "Where is Les? And where is Leon?" "Here, Mother." The 2 boys pushed through the children to reach her side. "Tonight," Gladys told the younger children, "I want you all to get a good rest. We will take a long, long walk tomorrow." Ninepence ran ahead to open the door as Les helped Gladys to the house, and Swalong hurried to prepare something for Gladys to eat. As the steaming bowls of boiled wheat, strings, and vegetables were placed before her, she told her oldest children and the missionary workers why they must leave. "It is no longer safe to stay in Shanxi," she said. "The Japanese have placed a price on my head. We must join the other children in Xi'an. We'll leave at dawn. I must see that everything is packed for the journey." "No," Ninepence said gently. "You need to rest if you are going to walk that far. Swalan and I will see that everything is ready." "We will help," the other workers told her, "but we must stay here. There will be other children coming. We'll keep the inn open for them, but you must go before the soldiers come here to arrest you." Grateful for once to leave the preparation to others, Gladys lay down on the kiang to sleep. Late that afternoon she awoke, thinking of her friend the Mandarin. She got up and left the inn quietly. She went down the road to the east gate and walked slowly down the war-torn street to the Mandarin's yamen. As her footsteps whispered through its empty halls, she thought back to the meetings that had taken place here. All the splendor and ceremony were gone. When she reached the Mandarin's quarters, only one guard stood outside the big doors. When the guard saw Gladys, he jerked open the door to the Mandarin's rooms and yelled, "It is she!" Gladys smiled, thinking that in the old days that would have cost him his head. War had changed many customs. The Mandarin came forward to greet her. "Awade," he said warmly. "Welcome. It is good to see you, Mandarin," she said. "Perhaps this meeting will be the last one we have. I can stay in these mountains no longer. The Japanese have put a price on my head. I am leaving and taking the children with me." "Where will you go?" her friend asked sadly. "Over the mountains to Xi'an. The other children are safe there. The Japanese have reached the Yellow River," the Mandarin said. "It lies between here and Xi'an. You will have to cross enemy territory. We will stay away from them as much as possible, Gladys replied. We will follow paths the Japanese will never find. With 100 children, the Mandarin asked in amazement. With 100 children? The Mandarin asked in amazement. Yes, with 100 children, Gladys replied firmly. Not one can be left behind. And how will you feed them? God will provide. Have you not found that this is so? Gladys asked. The Mandarin nodded. However, for this time you must allow me to be God's agent. 2 men will go part of the journey with you carrying grain. It will take several weeks of travel to reach Xi'an. You know that. I know. We leave at dawn. God will be with you, Awade. The next morning, Gladys awoke early. Darkness hid in the bombed corner of the inn and disguised the broken doors, the sagging balcony, and the rubble in the courtyard. In a moment, Gladys thought sleepily, Yang will call that breakfast is ready. The crowded Kians will stir with the awakening muleteers. Listen, even now the muleteers will move impatiently in the courtyard. Mother, a voice interrupted Gladys' thoughts. She blinked as Ninepence stepped inside the room. It was not the 6-year-old Ninepence of the old days, but an older Ninepence. Gladys sighed, fully awake now, remembering where she was and why she was here. The movement below was not mules, but the older children getting ready for the journey. And behind her, the bodies stirring on the Kians were not muleteers, but children. Mother, Ninepence repeated, her glossy hair swinging in the dawning light as she bent over Gladys. You are awake. Yes, Ninepence, Gladys replied softly. I was just thinking of the old days. When the muleteers filled the inn with their laughter, when not a sound disturbed the stories of Christ, Ninepence sighed. It seemed so long ago. Gladys was surprised. To her it seemed like yesterday. Time in the life of a child is like water, she thought. These children will forget the pain and trouble of war, and they will return and rebuild their land, just as their parents did so many times. How strong are my people, she said aloud, turning to Ninepence. Pray with me, Ninepence. Pray that their strength will be in the Lord. Ninepence followed her mother onto the balcony and knelt beside her. Gently their voices rose on the morning air. When the boys heard them, they too knelt on the cool gray bricks of the courtyard below and lifted their voices in prayer. With the coming of dawn, the inn became alive with the sound of children racing back and forth across the courtyard. They played with their bedding, chased each other, and shouted with the joy of the morning. When the Mandarin's men reached the inn, Gladys was ready. The 20 oldest girls between the ages of 12 and 15 rounded up the younger children. The 7 older boys, ranging from 11 to 15, lined them up. Most of the children were between 4 and 8 years old, young and excited. Sighing, Gladys hung a whistle around her neck, knowing that she would need something to call the more adventurous children back from danger. She looked toward the end of the line. 14-year-old Les waved back at her. He would see that every child left the inn, and Gladys nodded and walked out the gates of the inn. The children followed her, pushing and shouting happily. Each child carried his own bedding and his own bowl and chopsticks. The long procession wound slowly through the town and out the west gate. The younger children left the line running ahead and then back. Finally, Gladys gave up trying to control them and let them run. Several times she blew her whistle to call some of the boys down off tall outcrops of rock, the long line of children moving raggedly along. At nightfall, they reached a mountain village, and as the children wound past a Buddhist temple, a tall priest called out to Gladys in amazement, "Where are you going with all these children?" Gladys looked at him as he stood on the steps with his long yellow robe wound around his body. "To Xi'an," she replied. "But we are looking for a place to stay tonight." "Come in," the priest said. "You can sleep in the temple." So Gladys found herself curled up at the foot of a golden Buddha, surrounded by chattering children. And when they quieted down enough to hear other sounds, they soon realized that they were not alone in the temple. Rats! Leaping to her feet, she was followed immediately by the other girls. Les, Tay, and Liang found wooden branches and attacked the rats. To comfort the younger children, Gladys began to sing softly. Finally, all was quiet again, and the young children drifted off back to sleep. The older boys sat up for a while, But the rats didn't return. At last, the boys too fell asleep. The next morning, they were on their way again. Refreshed, the younger ones ran and played, climbing the rocks over the trail and leaping down again. By afternoon, they began to get tired. "When are we going home?" they asked. "We're tired, and it's time for our lessons." "We'll have our lesson while we travel," Gladys said, and she began to tell them a story. Those closest to her could hear, but the others could not. So she began to quote verses instead. "Say them with me, first girls and then boys." She said, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The girls echoed, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And the boys roared, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." On the verses went until the psalm was finished. Then one of the girls began to sing Rock of Ages, cleft for me. The others joined cheerfully. By nightfall, they were still far from any village. The mists of night covered them damply as they sought shelter under the rocky ledges. The next morning, they arose stiffly and began another day. That evening, they met a traveler who invited them to stay at their house. "How long will it take to reach the Yellow River?" 5 days by mule on the regular trail," the man replied. "Well, how long will it take us, Mother?" Les asked. Gladys thought of the slow progress they were making on the rocky cliffs. "We're going right through the mountains. On foot, too. Probably about 12 days, Gladys replied, cupping her hands about her bowl of hot tea. She saw the look Ninepence gave one of the other girls. "I know, the food won't last long. We'll have to trust God as we've always done. He's never failed us, Ninepence." "I know, Mother," was her gentle reply. "He will take care of us." In the morning, the mandarin's 2 men had to go back. The traveler with whom they had stayed provided them with a coolie to carry the grain farther. There wasn't much grain left. Gladys and the children walked on and on. The older boys led, finding the paths, and at one of the villages they found a bucket of whitewash. Leon and Tay used it to write messages on the rocks for the younger ones to follow. "This is the way, walk ye in it," and they squealed in delight. Eagerly they rushed ahead to be the first to find the next message. "Fear not, ye little flock." Until the whitewash was gone, the line of children moved along faster than usual. But after 2 or more nights on the mountain, the whitewash was gone, and so was the grain. The coolie, relieved of his burden, also returned home. Gladys stopped to look around. The mountaintop on which they stood was bleak, and it was bare. In the distance, mountain peaks stretched as far as she could see, and mist curled between them as they rose sharply to the sky. Gladys sighed. The trails to the south were flinty and rocky, the villages few and far between. "I'm thirsty," Francis said quietly. Gladys glanced down at his hand with the missing fingers. Remembering, she searched the sky again, looking for plains, but saw none. "I'm thirsty." "We'll look for places in the rock where the mist left water overnight," Gladys said. There would be no water until the next village. After sipping what drops were collected in the rocky crevices, they began walking again. They came to a rocky slope that looked impassable. "Which way do we go now?" Les asked. "This way," Gladys pointed to the slope. Les stared at her. "Well, how?" "We'll have to hold hands and form a chain. Then we'll pass the younger children down one by one." The older children carried all the bedding now, and the younger ones struggled along, no longer running and no longer playing. 7 nights out, they were in a region unknown to Gladys. The girls' faces were sunburned. Their lips were cracked. The oldest girls, whose feet had been bound before the governor's law, struggled along a few yards at a time. The children's shoes were wearing out, their feet torn and bruised. Gladys' heart moved with pity. "How can they make it, Lord?" she said. Prayerfully she began to sing. "Guide me, O thou great Jehovah, pilgrim through this barren land. I am weak, but thou art mighty. Hold me with thy powerful hand. Bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more. Feed me till I want no more." Suddenly, Tay and Leon came running back down the trail toward them. "Soldiers!" they cried. "Soldiers!" And that's the end of chapter 12. See you next time for chapter 13, The Long Journey.